Before I get into this video, I always have to emphasize that you should always go for units that you find fun. So for example, if you find Tang Xuan fun, then go for him, summon for him, because the whole point of a game is just to have fun, right? If you don't have fun in a game, then what's the point of playing it? So I'm only going to suggest units that are going to be valuable, the 100 Wishstones or more for their rezos. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Let's go through the easiest ones first. Intisar, you can easily skip her. She doesn't see much use at R0 or R2 and below. I have her at R0 for the longest time. I have not used her even once. And at R2, she does become slightly usable and only in Andras and not much else. So yeah, she's an easy skip. And then Ahmed, he is an exceptional unit. At R0, he has a lot of uses. In Falsetto Fantasy, you can use him in all 3 bosses, Forbiter, Sonica, and also Dark Starlord. He is really good in PvP because there's a lot of hides running around. So I would say R0, if you want to get him, he is worth it. But he is in the wish pool, so there's no rush in getting him. If you want to get him to R2, I would say only if you have him at R1, then you could spend 100 Wishstones for his R2, because his R2 is also very good. It gives you speed per supporting song stacks. I think it's up to maximum of 30 speed, which is a lot. And then this one is going to be the difficult one, Farah. She is really good, and especially because of the typing. She is a Wind Esper, and the Wind Tower is, I find, to be the hardest. I've skipped like a few days, a lot of days actually. As you can see, I'm at 50, then all of a sudden 79, and then 50 again. I've skipped a lot of days, but I find the Wind Tower to be the most difficult one, because when you take a look at the Wind Espers, Yunchuan is a very good DPS at R2, but mostly for single target. His AoE capabilities is not that much. It's still good, but the turn limit is going to kind of screw you up because it just doesn't do enough AoE damage. And then Tang Xuan is also a very good AoE DPS, but that's only once you get him to R2 or above, when he starts pursuing in towers. Ashley is a very good AoE DPS as well. And then we have Camille, and then the rest is just not that much. Mateo is a single target DPS, and he takes a lot of turns, which, you know, sometimes kind of screws up your run. Nora is also a pretty good AoE DPS, but we don't really have that many good AoE DPS for the wind types. So I would say if you want to summon for Farah just for the tower, it's worth it, because when you go into the 3 teams, it's going to be very difficult with the amount of AoE DPS that we have in Wind Tower. That is good. Just for the tower, she is exceptional because she does have a freeze, and she does a lot of damage as well. Freeze on S3, freeze on S2, that's pretty crazy, and also a defense down, and a guaranteed crit when the enemy is frozen. So yeah, she does a lot of damage. She also has a attack lead, which is also useful in the towers. But aside from the towers, she is also good in point war offense. Not so much for defense, because for defense, people can counter pick against your defense, so she's not going to work all the time in defense. You're not going to see her a lot in defense because she only really counters the speed cleave teams, because of the fact that she cannot be AP control, right? Her passive skill, her golden rim buff, which is this one, synergy, immune to AP down and damage taken minus 40%. She cannot be AP down, which means, yeah, TA cannot do anything to her. Ashley cannot push her back. And also, by the way, if you guys don't know, I think it's maybe a bug or whatever, you know, DISLYTE has a lot of bugs, but she is not just immune to AP down, she is also immune to the AP swap that TA and CJ does. Even though it's not regarded as AP down or AP up, she is immune to it for some reason. So yeah, she is good at countering TA, but it's mostly just for offense team, and sometimes it just also doesn't win. If you go into like a well-tuned TA team, if they're all at 100% AP, then she's not even gonna get a turn, even though she got a AP boost. So yeah, her uses in PvP, it varies depending on the team comp that you fight against, but she is good. She counters TA quite well, and she also does a lot of damage. You can use her in the cleave team to provide the stuns and freeze, so that it's more consistent for your cleave team, right? If you don't kill the enemies in one shot, then they're frozen, and then you can do your stuff when you get your turns. If you want to summon for her, I would say she's R0. You don't really need to go for her R2. Her R2 just makes her counter flow espers even more, which I don't think she needs. I think she's already countering flow espers at R0 good enough. So yeah, R2, I don't think she's worth it. And R6, I don't even know what her R6 is, but if you're planning to R6 her, then you're a whale, so you don't even need this video. So yeah, that's Farah. Alright, in the PTR server we have a rerun Tang Xuan. I don't think he's worth it, the 100 Wishstones at any resonance. Maybe you can argue at R5 you can spend 100 Wishstones to get his R6, but it's only really just for trials, because anywhere else his R6 doesn't really do much for you. Maybe towers. In towers his R6 is a huge upgrade, but I don't think it's worth it to spend 100 Wishstones just for that. For Dark Starlord, you only need him to be at R2, because then he starts pursuiting. You don't need him to be at R6 because there's only 3 characters in Dark Starlord. So yeah, Tang Xuan, I would say he's also an easy skip. I don't think Archibald is worth to summon. His S1 is kinda meh. It inflicts silence for 2 turns with a 70% chance. And then his S2 is 120%, right? Yeah, 120%. That's kinda low. And then his S3 does about 180, which is, it's decent. Ggez does about 200% turn 1. But he does increase his damage from the Carnival Heat stacks. Each stack of the Carnival Heat increases his damage by 1%, and you can stack a maximum of 25 stacks. So you can boost his damage up by 25%, which is really not that much, to be honest. 180% times 25%, what is that? That's around 200 something percent. It's not really gonna do much for you. And he only really pops off when you run him with Mavis, whereas Mavis can run alone without him and she will do just fine. But he needs Mavis in the team in order to be good, because when you run him with Mavis, he gets a 100% crit chance. Right here, if Mavis is an ally, his crit rate plus 100% and his AP plus 30% upon landing a critical hit triggers once per turn, which is, it's really strong for a DPS character to get 100% crit rate. That's why Ggez is so good. That's why R2 Tever is so good. You can pump everything else into speed, attack and crit damage, right? You can get a lot more crit damage from that. But he only really pops off when you run him with Mavis. So yeah, I don't think Archibald is worth it to summon. Maybe someone can find a comp that they're gonna pop off like crazy, but I don't think 100 Wishstones, especially with Mavis in the pool as well, I don't think spending 100 Wishstones on him is going to be worth it. So yeah, let's go through Mavis. I think Mavis is one of the few espers that is a must summon. She has a very interesting kit. This Undertaker skill is just so good. It's not countered by anything in the game. Tever does not counter it because this is not counted as a revive mechanic. You prevent them from dying. So Tever, when he goes for that unit with the highest attack and kills them, it doesn't kill them, and instead it puts them into the graveless state. And it doesn't even have a cooldown. So as long as she is on the field, she will always have your teammates either in the graveless state or in the soul parade state. So the only real counter to Mavis is just to kill her first. It's not even like Cecilia, where Cecilia is countered by Tever and Taylor. Not like that. The only counter to her is just to kill her first. Otherwise, if you kill the rest of the allies and then you kill her, then she will revive everyone with the soul parade, and then they're gonna counter cleave you, right? She's not gonna be guaranteed good in Falsetto Fantasy, because right now the team is very packed. We already have like very good units to fill in each spot for each teams for the Falsetto Fantasy. And one thing you should know is that the Holiday Rest crit damage up plus 60% is just that. It is just plus 60% to your crit damage. It is not a times 1.6 times like attack buff is to the characters. Attack buff is straight up your total attack times 1.4, which is what makes attack buff so valuable. So if you're thinking of replacing your attack buffer with Mavis in your Falsetto Fantasy teams, it's not going to work well, because you're not going to get a big boost from her crit damage buff than you will from an attack buff. So yeah, her place in Falsetto Fantasy is going to be a bit weird. And also in Dark Starlord, it's not ideal to be using this Holiday Rest buff because you have a chance of taking crits by 100%. So I think the only team that you can use her reliably is in the Yunchuan team, because Yunchuan puts miss rate up on the boss by 75% if I'm not mistaken. So if you use her with Yunchuan, then the boss will land a miss instead of a crit, right? 75% chance. So your units don't die easily. And Dark Starlord, he ramps up his damage quite a lot. The only reason that the Yunchuan team doesn't get one shot is because of the miss rate up that Yunchuan provides. If Dark Starlord crits you, he one shots your DPS Espers. So yeah, that's one thing to note. You don't really want your units to die in Dark Starlord because of the amount of turn counts that you get. You only get 70 turns for Team 2 and Team 3. It's not a lot. Her cooldown is rather long. It's on a 5 turn cooldown. It doesn't go down. Unless you have her at R2, she goes down only when 3 of your teammates are in the Graveless state. And running her in Yunchuan and Embla's team, I don't think is going to be the ideal team, because the Embla and Yunchuan team, you don't want them to have any turns of incapacitation, and going into that Graveless state means they are incapacitated because they cannot do anything, right? If Yunchuan is dead and goes into this Graveless state, he is not going to pursue, therefore you're missing a lot of the DPS. If Embla goes into the state, she is not going to spread her Corrupted Seed, therefore she's missing a lot of damage. And there's always going to be downtime between the Graveless and Soul Parade state, because you need to cast her S3 in order to use the Soul Parade buff, right? Once again, her place in Sentinel Hunt is not solidified, but her buffs are Golden Rim. Counter Sonica and Dark Starlord puts buff block on you. So if you want to try, maybe you can use her in a team that doesn't have an attack buffer and just her as a soul buffer. Maybe that could work, because you cannot buff block a Golden Rim, right? That way you don't need to bring a cleanser, and you don't need to bring a healer as well, because when you're using her, you don't need to be healing. She's just going to be providing the Soul Parade. And one more thing about her is that, I don't know if this is a bug or not, when you pair her up with Hyde, for some reason Hyde can still get the Soul Parade or Graveless buff, even though Hyde doesn't take any other buffs. Ahmed's Golden Rim buff doesn't go to Hyde. It goes to him, but he doesn't get it. He just gets the Breath of the Deep stacks. But for some reason, Mavis buff does go to Hyde. So you can still use the strategy of running Hyde with Mavis, and you can do some serious damage to any defense comps that has, you know, even a hint of AP controlling. You use your Hyde with full DPS set and counter attack, no speed, then he's gonna go to town, right? So yeah, I still don't know if that's a bug or not. I wouldn't summon her just because she has a good synergy with Hyde, because they could fix that down the line somewhere. So yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so I've rambled on for too long. Let's recap. I think Mavis is worth it to R0. I think she is a must summon because of how unique her skill set is. Being the revive skill cannot be countered, cannot be cooldown up. She still puts the Graveless stack when she is stunned, and only when she is killed is when you don't provide the Graveless stack, right? So she is a one-of-a-kind Esper that I think is a must-have. She's gonna have a lot of longevity in trials, maybe in Falsetto Fantasy, and in PvP as well. I think she's gonna have a very good longevity. So yeah, that's about it. Ciao.